So what's the plan tonight? Someone old, someone new, someone borrowed?
Someone new. How about you?
Plenty of options.
But you never make a move.
The idea of being told no is not...
We're all told no.
You're not.
That is not true.
For me, being told no is like being told I don't exist. It's like I've disappeared or something.
Hey, you're a catch.
Not like them.
It's a look, that's all.
It's a look people want.
Hello, everybody, and I am Peter Travers, and this is Popcorn, where we tell you what is popping everywhere in the culture. So, I saw this show. It's such a title, you know, because Ryan Murphy does this. It's American Crime Story, and it's the assassination of Gianni Versace. My guest today, Darren Criss, who I think is brilliant in this show, is not Gianni Versace. You know, he just isn't, so we can discuss later why that's happening. But he's here for the first time, so I'm delighted
thrilled
to have
be
you
here.
here.
This is great. I can't
This
tell
is
you
great.
how many taxi rides I've had graced
With me,
by your presence.
Since
Yeah.
that's it. With nothing, you can't hear anything.
Nothing
but
else.
You just
yeah,
see
I just see
me
how wildly
talking to
gesticulative
somebody.
you are, and I go, "This is somebody I want
That's
to
true.
sit
I
next
can't
to."
stop it.
Yeah, but be careful because the popcorn
because
is
I
real.
will
I've
knock
heard.
everything over.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
All right, I'm going to start with this because you hear it constantly. It's people's being shocked with you playing Andrew Cunanan, this killer, 5 people, including Versace that he's killed. And to most people in the world, you're the guy from Glee, who everybody liked. But just talking to you earlier, I could see that, you know, you're trouble.
Yeah, I'm terrifying.
So Ryan Murphy knew
He must have known
from working with you that this was going to be difficult.
Well, I think that. Well, were you saying that it was going to be difficult, or that it was?
That you could play somebody with a true dark side.
I think it's less about him. I should hope it's less about him thinking that there was a dark side so much as him understanding that I'm an actor and understanding that like all actors, hopefully, you know, we all strive to have access to all sides of the human psyche. So I hope that it's less him thinking, man, this guy's a dark weirdo, and more about understanding that. You know, I'm as much as I make fun of the concept of the craft, you know, despite myself, I do see myself as a trained actor. I didn't say a good actor, but I'd like to think that I brought that to work on Glee and all the other things that I've done. So yeah, I've been kind of waiting and working my whole life for an opportunity like this, and the fact that it came up, I was sort of on the sidelines being like, all right, put me in, coach. So the fact that Ryan believed in that, I'm very much indebted to.
When people are seeing you and they're saying, Blaine was a guy everybody loved. Andrew Cunanan, in this presentation of that life and the way you play it, is, of course, this person guilty of those crimes, but he's also a human being.
Absolutely.
If we don't forgive him, we still understand him because of what you did. So that was me in the beginning congratulating you on what you did, because that is difficult to do. It can often be a gimmick for an actor. You say, well, you think of me as this, but I'm going to play this, but it's surface. You didn't do surface. You got really underneath there.
Well, thank you.
To the nerve endings.
I think
and
there's
was
a-
it did it scare you?
It doesn't scare me, no, because I think we're all closer to somebody like Andrew than we care to admit, as we are to all characters in this world. I think, you know, everybody's the hero of their own story. It doesn't matter where their morality lies or whatever their sort of lifelong emotional arc is. We're all the heroes of our own tale. So you don't, as an actor, and this is my go-to line, I'm in the business of empathy. That is what I do for a living, is my livelihood. I try and apply that to my day-to-day life, but particularly when you're playing characters. And this was a real person. And we all focus on the worst, most horrible, deplorable things, which is obviously he took lives. He was a murderer. He killed people, which is a deplorable, unforgivable thing. And I'm not asking people to forgive him or exonerate him, but I am challenging people to question their own senses of empathy and seeing how many common denominators they can find with somebody that they might immediately pin as somebody very distant from themselves. But as an actor, you don't approach him as this is somebody who killed somebody. This is somebody like everybody else, has felt pain, desire, fear, love, ambition, who doesn't know what it's like to want to rise above your station or get that which you can't have. I mean, these are all things that are very primary ones and zeros, that if that's your point of entry as any person, much less an actor, you can kind of start seeing through that magnifying glass a little easier. So that's kind of my approach to somebody like Andrew.
Well, we see when we're watching the show that it starts with the assassination of Versace and goes backwards until by episode 8 we're basically seeing Andrew's childhood, and this very warped childhood with a mother who's got mental challenges and a father who's got difficulties way beyond that. But you, when Ryan Murphy comes to you and says, I want you to play Andrew Cunett, what did you know about him before you were given a script about him?
I mean, I knew what most people know, which is why I think we start with it in the show, which is the assassination of Gianni Versace. That is the reason why these other 4 murders are being brought to light, because the penultimate murder, other than him taking his own life, was someone as famous as Gianni. So that was all I knew. I knew that Gianni was shot in the front of his home. I remember the first time I went to Miami, passing the house and being like, oh my God, that's where it was. But other than that, I didn't know much about Andrew and his backstory, which is exciting for me, I guess, as a storyteller, because people really don't know this. Whereas OJ, there's an overwhelming amount of information we have, and we all remember so many things. Whereas this is something, I think, unless you're in the fashion world, living in Miami, it might be something a little more distant from you. And that's a really appealing notion, because I think the American crime here, other than the murders, is how come I didn't know about this? And we kind of explore that.
And also the sense of, at the time in 1997, and the reason he wasn't captured,
right,
is the homophobia,
Sure.
that the cops didn't care.
I think there's, we kind of lightly go through it on our show. I think it has much more deeper implications, but Andrew was really heavily involved in this very subcultural world of the gay community, which is these sort of rough trade S&M, parties and sexual activity, which I think for most people on the outside, for the sort of typical heteronormative outside world looking in, especially in the 90s, that's such a bizarre world that a lot of folks might not understand. And that was a world that Andrew was really heavily involved in, and you can make all kinds of sort of psychological assumptions as to why that was something that he really enjoyed, as far as being the dominant person in his life, having control over somebody sexually, enjoying having somebody be submissive in a world where he's kind of, it's somewhere where all of his sort of suppressed desires can kind of be manifested in this sort of sexual power. And I think this was something that was pretty predominant throughout, I think, a lot of his sexual life. So when you see him, engaging in this sort of, stripping of identity of himself or other people, I think there is a joy to that. And while it might seem weird to people, there's a much deeper psychological story going on there. And the bow I'll tie on this is that when you see something like that as an audience member, you go, this is weird. Imagine what that's like for the FBI in the 90s, and kind of discovering all these things and not really knowing how to breach this subculture. Is this something that we want to broadcast to our children that is happening? And I even will give those folks the benefit of the doubt. I think it's less about, when we say homophobia, I think we think of extreme cases of actual hate crimes and violence, but I think there's a more institutionalized homophobia that comes from fear and misunderstanding and uncertainty of what things are, and do I want to talk about this, and do I look strange if I'm investigating it? And those little questions build up to a much larger ignorance on an institutional, systematic level in the FBI or in local investigation, which is why so many of these cases, which, by the way, this led to a man who was this is the largest failed manhunt in FBI history.
Yeah.
I think that's how that'll happen. And to me, that sort of negligence and unfortunate ignorance is what the American crime story is for this season.
But again, with you now, this is you playing another gay character. After Glee, after Hedwig, which I managed to see you in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was just...
Are you just saying that,
No,
Peter Travers?
I've even seen you in How to Succeed, in like the 2.5 minutes you played it on Broadway.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Peter
so I'm
Travers.
a Darren Criss completist.
You really are.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can have a
Now
conversation.
we can do it because I know if you've seen
You
you in
exec
Hedwig,
platinum status with like the Darren miles. This is really
Andrew
impressive.
doesn't seem that far away, you know, sometimes. Because we see you, I've seen you when you play Hedwig being somebody who isn't anything like Blaine.
Sure.
You know, this is very different.
Yeah.
So what is this with you, a straight kid growing up in San Francisco, playing these gay characters?
You know what's so interesting is that the fact that Andrew was a gay man never really came into any kind of question until we started promoting the show. Because objectively you go, yeah, that is kind of a curious through line in characters I've got to play. But what I think is so great is that it never even is a part of the decision. Glee, I was just lucky because that was a role that I got, and he happened to be a gay character, and I think the popularity of that character was because he was connected to a really popular, interesting, compelling storyline that had the bonus of having sort of social weight to it. So that was just me winning the lottery. Hedwig is just an excellent story. It's one of my favorite musicals. Yes, Hedwig is a queer character, but again, I'm thinking in terms of the great music and the impact of the story and just the explosive power of that character.
Mm-hmm.
And then with this, I'm thinking more of the terms of the grand scope of the larger tale of the American crime story of the murder of these 5 men and the negligence of the FBI and the sort of the social landscape at the time. These are the stories that I'm thinking of. They happen to all be based in queer gay characters. So lucky me, you know?
Well, it is like, because in Glee, your character, unlike Kurt, unlike Chris Colfert's character, has got it together. Where, well, he does in his own way. Blaine is...
At certain parts of the show,
he's dealing with it better than Kurt does. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that watch that show that took great comfort in the fact of this relationship. That hadn't happened in this context.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, it becomes more and more clear to me. The show we ended about 2 years ago, so it started almost 8 years ago, I think. 8 years, I think, for folks of a certain age isn't that long, but when you're a teenager, 15, so, 15 to 23 is a big effing difference on all fronts. Mm-hmm. And it's been cool that enough time has gone by to where I'll meet people, young adults, like in the workforce, in the world, in New York or Los Angeles, that are doing very impressive things, that are very much conscious, mature adults, that will speak to me or people from our show and say, you know, and mention the effect that things like that or other parts of the show that had a positive effect on them. And it doesn't seem real. You know, if a teenager is telling you something, not to discredit the validity of a teenager's excitement, there's a certain lack of gravitas when there's like, oh my God, I love your show. And you're like, thank you very much. It's very sweet of you. Sort of pat on the head and say thank you. But when you have an adult coming up to you and saying, I just want to let you know that when I was a teenager, and you know, if they're a high-profile journalist somewhere, you're going, wow, like I'm a part of your narrative. You're like a smart kid. Like, geez, I didn't really know the impact. So that's happening more and more as a lot of these young people are becoming adults, and you know, kind of validating their experience to me after the fact makes it real to me, and that becomes a real thing.
Can I go to you, though, as a child? Because when you're doing this, you're starting your own business. You have that Star Kid thing.
Oh,
going
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Look, I'm telling you, I am a completist of Darren.
Oh, you really are? I'm very impressed.
I've seen The Girl Most Likely.
Oh, my gosh.
I won't call it a great film.
It was certainly a fun film for me to do.
But what you did in it shows another aspect of you that most people haven't seen either.
Well, that was, I mean, God, I did that. It was one of my first films I got to do off the heels of Glee. And I'm there with Kristen Wiig, who just came off the heels of Bridesmaids, even though she was already on SNL. She did a lot going
She
for
was
her.
Kristen Wiig.
She was Kristen Wiig already. Matt Dillon,
Annette Bening.
Oh, my God, it was a dream come true. I mean, I was a big fan of the filmmakers. They had done American Splendor, which was a favorite film of mine as a teenager. Gosh, what was the question? I'm sorry. I don't even know. I'm sort of just reminiscing, going, gosh,
Because
Peter
it
knows
was
my life.
because Star Kid, and because of a very Potter musical.
Yeah.
The things that you're inventing with your
Do you
friends.
just go on Wikipedia right before you sit down with people? Is that it?
It's
Bless
sad
you.
that my brain is just filled with this. You know?
It's okay. It's your job.
There's not,
as it should be.
But if it were just a job, I wouldn't do it.
But back to Star Kid, if I may, I
Yes.
will say what's cool about that is that was something that happened at the advent of what we now know as the social media, the beginning of it all. That was something I did in college. Star Kid is a theater company that was built from a show that we just did in college, like a lot of college students, particularly theater kids. We do shows all the time, and you do it for your friends, you do it for your faculty, or they're chock full of inside private jokes that are only meant for your friends. And for decades at institutions all over the country, people did this stuff, and they lived and died right in college, and then they were never seen again. But
now there's YouTube.
There's YouTube, which was a brand new infantile thing right when I was getting out of college. So we happened to have filmed one of these shows, which was one of many shows we had done, and we put it on the internet not because it was a platform, because it wasn't at the time, but because that was easier than printing DVDs, going to Walgreens, getting the DVD, sending it to each person wherever they were living around the country or the world even. So we put it on YouTube and sent our link out to our friends to be like, hey, remember the show we did? Forgetting that the internet is 100% public and that other people could watch it. And that became my sort of first hit. And I think it wasn't for the success of that show, I don't think I would have had the longevity that I got to have on something like Glee. So that to me was kind of my first big brush with, oh my God, I guess I'm doing something here.
With the whole Harry Potter thing? With with doing that. Because, man, to just hear, I got to get back to Hogwarts is a tremendous song.
Hogwarts.
Hogwarts.
Nice.
Yes.
Hogwarts.
Yes.
Thanks, man. Well, that's probably my. What's fun for me is that I get to live this dichotomy between being a musician and a songwriter and being an actor. One is a very proactive livelihood, the other one is a very passive livelihood. I'm careful with that because obviously once you get a job as an actor, you make proactive choices, but I have to wait around for things like Versace to happen. I mean, that was an incredible role that came to me, whereas with music, I can create it and just make it on my own terms and do things. So I'm lucky to have that outlet.
But we, Darren Criss, who has never been on this show yet, end in song.
We end in song,
We
shall we?
always end in song.
Okay, well,
I don't know what it'll be, but I know that there's something in your head.
You know what? You saw How to Succeed, right?
I did. How to
How to. We'll tell you what. There is a brotherhood of man, a benevolent brotherhood of man. Take it away, make one. Oh, aren't you proud to be in that fraternity? The great big brotherhood of man.
Yes.
And then we'll have to do a dance break.
I sang with Darren Criss.
That was a real pleasure, Peter Travers.
Wow,
Thank
that
you
was
so much.
incredible.
Thanks, man.
See, I did see How to Succeed.
You did.